Good evening. Today is February 9th, 2023, and the time is 6:30 p.m. I will now call the regular meeting of the ISD 191 School Board or Board of Education to order. Welcome to those of you in the audience here or anyone who may be watching us online. Director Chester, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Director Chester.
Second.
Seconded by Director Werb. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. We'll now receive a report from Director Werb about the mid-year review for Superintendent Dr. Battle.
On January 26, 2023, the District 191 School Board and Superintendent Dr. Teresa Battle met in a closed session for her annual mid-year review. The mid-year review is used as a gauge during the year to assess where Dr. Battle is at for meeting her performance goals that have been set, and for the board to also provide any constructive feedback for her current performance that will allow her to see what measurements can be improved upon before the final performance review in June. The board normally provides mid-year performance review and feedback to Dr. Battle in one-on-one meetings. This year, the board felt that it would be more efficient and effective to provide the mid-year performance review the same way we conduct the final performance review in a closed session. The review consisted of evaluating Dr. Battle is as far as meeting her personal goals for the 2022-2023 school year, as well as providing feedback of her performance in areas of strengths and areas for improvement. There are 3 personal goals for the Superintendent Battle during the 2022-23 school year. Improve competency in moving toward adaptation and cultural competency as described by the Intercultural Development Continuum. Linking knowledge of my culture and other cultures to increase skill of shifting perspectives and to link my cognitive ability to generate cultural appropriateness in my affect and behavior. Goal 2, by January 2023, complete action plans for 191 roadmap strategic directions, a dashboard for the goal, attainment metrics, and profile of a learner. Goal 3, by September 2022, present a plan with goals and strategies for reducing enrollment loss and retention of students and implement the plan throughout the 2022-23 school year. We identified that Dr. Battle is making the necessary strides to complete the goals she has set for herself. Constructive feedback was provided, and we continue to appreciate the dedication and support of our students that Dr. Battle provides to our district. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from board members? Seeing none, thank you, Director Werb. The next item on the agenda is to receive a report about the fiscal year 23 revised budget from Stacy Sovine, Executive Director of Administrative Services. Welcome, Stacy.
Good evening, Chair Hume, Dr. Battle, members of the board. Excuse me while I unload my 3-ring binder of information tonight. I feel like I'm back in college with information overload. It's like, let's just do the test already. Bringing to you a report on our revised budget. We'll be providing a lot of different information as we kind of go through this report, but I do want to give you the headline up front that our revised budget is nearly flat compared to our audited results for FY22. That really is the big takeaway. We were right about 32 million. We're still right about 32 million as far as our fund balance. So getting into that, I'll provide some background information as we go through this, but I do want you to kind of have an idea of where we're headed with that. Again, the overview for tonight is to provide the board and our community with an updated finance information. Also to set the stage for a recommendation to approve our FY23 revised budget a little bit later in our meeting tonight. Whoa, 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 whoa. The agenda, 4 different points that we'll be looking at. Where do we receive the funding? Again, this is just general information for you and the public. What restrictions might we have on our district spending? How does the district spend its money? And what is our current situation? The revenue, primarily 65% of our revenue comes from, for the general and categorical state aid is where that comes from, roughly $90 million. The second highest area that it comes from is our local levy here from our local community, about another $29 million with property taxes, and then 12% of the money comes from federal, and then other local revenue, 2% for about $3.3 million. Total revenue that we generate for the general fund is just under $138 million. What restrictions do we have? Well, our general fund capital, we can use that for personnel, staffing, equipment, but everything has to be aligned with state statute with that. Title funds is an example of the federal money that we receive. There are specific guidelines on how we can use that. It's primarily associated with high poverty rates. It's determined, often you'll hear is the free and reduced status within each of our schools, how much money is generated, what portion of that then goes to each of those buildings. We have a technology levy. That money is specifically used, has to be used for technology purposes, the people involved with the technology, and maintaining that equipment. Then we also have funds for community education and food and nutritional services. Those are separate fund balances that are not a part of our general fund, and that money stays within those areas. Community education often is the fee-based money that is generated that stays with them. Food and nutritional services has their own requirements from the federal government and also stays with feeding our students. How we use our money, as it's broken down by UFARs, 77% of all of our funds goes towards salary and benefits for our employees. So that's roughly $106 million. The second largest area is with our contracted services, just under $22 million. Contracted services would include transportation, teachers on call for our substitutes, utilities, and a number of other services that are rolled into that. Those are our 2 largest areas. Then about $4 million for supplies and another $5 million for capital expenses. Again, our expenditures are about $137, just under $138 million. The program dimension within UFARs is by the purpose. Okay, so instead of it, the area in which it's going, what is the purpose that it's being used for? So it's a different way of looking at the same money. It's just a different part of the code in the UFARs category. So again, 75% of the money that we receive goes directly towards instruction and instructional support, just over $103 million. About $14 million goes towards the maintenance and the services of our buildings and our facilities. $9 million for transportation, and then just under $6 million in other areas, and just under $6 million for administration, or about 4% of our overall budget. The other way that we're kind of divvying up the money, we broke it out by our negotiated units, bargaining agreements. So you can see roughly the FTEs in each of those units, the total for the salary, as well as benefits, and the percentage of our overall area. You'll notice that this number comes in closer to 100 million. Earlier I showed you the number was around 105. Okay, that 105 picks up areas such as activities, stipends, coverage for prep for somebody else if we have a sub that's missing. So there's a lot of hourly additional hours that are rolled into that 105. That captures everything. This 100 million looks specifically at those bargaining unit positions and what's attached to those. Kind of looking at our federal pandemic relief funds, what's included. This year, we're using about $10 million in those areas. $6 million is coming through the ESSER 3 funds, which Finance 160, Fin 160. And then also you'll see lots of other slivers that has been used over the year. Many of those areas have expired. We no longer have funds in those areas. We've used all of the resources available. Moving forward, we'll be looking at Fin 161 and Fin 160 for next year's budgeting purposes, what we have remaining there, which is going to fall somewhere between $8 and $9 million. Then looking at all of our funds, this is just in our general budget. The audited balance for last fiscal year was just over $32 million. Again, in the revenue was about 138. Expenditures around 138. So you're going to see that we're coming in fairly flat as to what our projected fund balance will be at the end of the year, plus where we are at this point in time. That's just our general fund. That's kind of the big one. All of the other fund categories we can kind of see. One thing I will point out, you'll see in this one, you'll probably notice a little bit more clearly in the other one, our internal service fund did take a drop close to $2 million. Large portion of that is retirement, but the majority of that is our self-funded medical. Okay, so later on tonight, where we're talking about a significant % increase in our medical insurance, is because we've had a large number of high cases. We're coming out of the COVID, which took a hit on our self-funded plan, and plus the inflationary costs that are rolling into that. Probably the biggest deficit that we're seeing is in the internal service fund at this point in time. Finally, the current reality, looking at our actual audited results for 21-22, you see that was $32.5 million. The revised budget at this point is 32.5, a little on the underside of that. Fairly flat. One of the things to remember as we adopted our budget for FY23, we were looking at a $29 million carryover from FY22. So when we had a $32 million carryover, that was already an increase of just over $3 million. So our budget position for this year is already $3 million better just because of the audited results from last year. Okay. Then again, there's other resources, looking at the breakdown by budget units as well as for staffing, the FTEs that went there. Just a reminder also, the numbers that we set every spring in June are based upon the people and the individuals we have at that point in time. People change. So we have somebody that leaves the district, retires. They could retire at a salary and a benefit package of $147,000 as a teacher, and the next person can come in closer to $62,000. We can have about an $80,000 swing just with one individual position. Okay? So just when you see those variances and those numbers from what was projected to what is actual, also so far this year, just in lane changes. We've had 43 lane changes where teachers have been going back to school, getting additional education, moving across the salary schedule from left to right, and that alone up to this point has cost us about $175,000 as well, just with the people moving across. A lot of movement. Also, with our enrollment coming in a little bit better than what we projected this year, we ended up adding FTEs at both middle schools as well as the high school to adjust for the larger population than what was forecasted for those areas. We've also added to our EL programming this year. So we added one FTE earlier in the season. Now we are adding another FTE at this point going forward for the rest of the year. So sometimes you have those adjustments that occur through the process. So next steps, recommendation, later on this evening through our business portion, we'll be bringing a recommendation to approve the FY23 revised budget. And then also we will be talking later on this evening on how the revised budget leads into some of the assumptions as we start talking about our budget building for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Do board members have any questions or comments? Dr. Miller.
Just clear or a little more information. Going back to whatever it was, one of the first slides, the where does it come from revenue? The federal aid, 15.8 million, 12%. If I remember right, a fair amount of that is restricted, or at least, if not directly earmarked, has tight control on how it's spent, correct?
Well, that throws a whole bunch of different money together when we say federal money. So we have special ed fed, we have Title I money, as well as all of the COVID relief funds. And yes, every one of those have tight restrictions on how
Right.
those different areas can be used.
It can't just be dumped into the general fund to be
That's right.
spent willy-nilly.
Right.
And the local revenues, 3.3, can you give an example of what's generating that? Just a couple off the top of your head.
Well, the property taxes and the local revenues,
I mean, I understand property tax.
yeah, the property taxes would be your levy that we just certified back in December. The local revenues, I would want to get more information to answer that question. I don't
Okay.
have that off, a little too new yet for that. I
right.
would have to get more for that, sorry.
No problem. It's not critical. It's actually more for anybody actually listening, but
Well, it's interesting, the local levy, members of the board, Chair Hume and Director Miller, there are some Minnesota-only funds that we get. Just became aware of legacy funding that's tied to land and use of the land, and I think it was $33,000 we get. So there are a lot of different pieces to that, but we'll get you more information about local revenue from our taxpayers.
okay. That would be it for them. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Dr. Werb.
Stacy, I remember as part of the discussions on the insurance, the health insurance plan, there was considering going out to RFP for the medical plan. Is that still being considered?
Under HITA, we are required to do that. We have received sealed proposals. They are scheduled next week to be opened with the largest bargaining unit as witness to that per HITA requirements. From there, then the selection or the recommendation will be made from those different proposals, and then we'll be bringing those to the board shortly as well. Yep,
Okay.
we're about 75% done.
Okay, all right. So when we look at that, that's for 2024, that would impact the budget for 2024? For any cost savings we might possibly see, depending on what possible offers we see with the RFP, if there's better options.
It may impact it. Again, the primary driver for our increase has been our stop loss portion,
Yep.
which has been underwater based upon our high claims. So really, the RFP portion that's going out is for our third-party administration and our stop loss insurance. And we may be able to see an improvement, but a lot of folks are, just based on our claims over the past few years, I do think we are still going to see a hit on our stop loss portion. As far as our network design, since we are self-funded, that primarily comes through us. So that would be, not sure how much of a savings we'll see on that, but again, I haven't seen the proposals yet. Those will be opened up next week, so we'll see.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
Just
Dr. Chester?
going back to the local revenues, I understand that you're not certain what makes up all of it, but I'm curious because I know that in the past we had received funding from the Greater Twin Cities United Way, or we would be writing some grants to support some of our programming or anything like that. Was wondering if that might be the bucket it lands in.
It very well could, or it may not be. I will find out.
Anyone else? All right. I just want to have one quick comment, and that's just thank you for the added context you provided us with information about how the enrollments affected us, or the retirements affected us, or changes in lanes, and all of those kind of the constantly moving pieces, because I think sometimes it's easy to forget it or for it not to click when we're looking at the budget and comparing X to Y. So I appreciate that context. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I guess that's it. So thank you for your report. Next, we will receive a report from Ava Drobnik, Student Board Representative.
Good evening, everybody. So just yesterday, as Snow Week became another thing to remember this year at the high school, upperclassmen enjoyed a sunny asynchronous day while the underclassmen took the pre-ACT. And Snow Week was just that. It was a thing to remember. Starting this year, Mr. Roos and Ms. Johnson filled the shoes of longtime Student Council Advisor Mr. Riggs. They did a great job coordinating all the events and helping delegate alongside the chairs of each event. Student Council serves as an expansive opportunity for students to orchestrate events like the assembly and dance. As committee chair, upperclassmen students that are chosen are responsible for making sure each event has all the pieces in order for it to run smoothly. The assembly, for example, requires reaching out to all the sports teams so that they can participate in the Olympic walk, or at least the winter sports teams, that is. And then also the Blazettes, the band, and writing the script as a whole, which that includes, you need to get royalty in there, all of their songs for the skits, and also just making sure that everyone's in place for all of those things. And this year, we even had like minute-to-win-it games at the assembly, so again, that all has to be written in there and coordinated beforehand. And luckily, each chair is fitted with a co-chair to help them alongside with the process. And most of those this year are filled by seniors because all of our chairs are juniors. And they do that so that next year, during homecoming, they can have the seniors plan for the assembly and the dance then. So like exactly how we did it this year is I was a chair on the assembly committee for homecoming. So then I was a co-chair on the assembly committee for Snow Week to help out the upcoming junior that did that, which was really fun. And Snow Week overall was really a fun celebration of winter and brought some zest for students mid-year, all thanks to Student Council and our new advisors. And Snow Week is a nod at our winter sports, which is perfect timing as some of these are winding down already. Girls hockey had sections last night against Eastview where they unfortunately lost, but we still have boys hockey to come on for us, so they've got a few games left until sections. And then Nordic and Alpine skiing both had sections within the last week, but unfortunately no athletes are advancing to any further competition. And we still have basketball, wrestling, boys swimming, and weightlifting going on, so that'll go through this month and bleed into next month a little as well. On top of student athletes, we have our extracurriculars, which draw passionate students alike. The focus mainly lately has been on the play Little Woman, which is coming up, and auditions were that the beginning of December, and rehearsals ramped up after winter break. There are 10 participating students attend rehearsals each day after school to prepare for the shows, which all start next week, Thursday, and then they'll run through the weekend for them. One of our talented theater seniors, Riley Klug, is also involved in speech and shared about how well the team was doing and especially how well they're bonding this year. Since the beginning of their tournament season in January, each weekend the team has had at least half of their competitors be ranked as finalists in their categories. Each weekend, two students were winners of their categories overall. And the categories, there's 19 different categories that the students can compete in, so there is some range there, which is fun. And one senior, Ellie Hovde, will even be competing at the national tournament in May, and that's going to be at Chanhassen High School. In further extracurricular news, Winter Drumline is in full swing. They recently had their first competition, which took place at Eden Prairie High School this past Saturday. Drumline is surprisingly competitive, said senior Caitlin Kelly, also sharing about how they practiced for 4 months in advance to their first competition. And practices were 3.5 hours in length, which I was mind-blown. And it's hard work to have a complete show by their first competition, but the goal is that they can have it done and get feedback from the judges and make tweaks for the next one. And then another aspect of our student life is the Black Student Union. They've been especially active because it's Black History Month. So they have a panel with Black staff from across the district to share directly with students about their experiences. I think the aim of that was to further open the line of communication between staff and students. And they also have a BSU fashion show planned, which will model clothes from local Black-owned businesses. So that should be fun for everybody. And then they also have a BSU showcase, which will actually be March 3rd, but it's in that kind of last week of February, where it's welcome to any student wishing to showcase Black excellence. So that'll actually happen during the school day, which is nice too, because then like everyone can go watch or just easily be a part of it. And apart from students, we've had a dedicated group of parents putting in the work for planning the senior party. They still have a little time there, so as of right now, the efforts are kind of focused on finding additional fundraising, and really it's a collective effort because I guess nobody wanted to be the sole fundraising coordinator. So they've just been working, together to get that done. And yeah, that's all I have tonight, so.
Thank you.
you.
Do board members have any questions or comments? All right. I'm so glad you had such, like, the nicest weather day of the year for your asynchronous day. That was great. And then I have to say, I was telling a coworker at my day job who lives in another state about Snow Week, and she said that is the most Minnesota thing I've ever heard of. Couldn't disagree with her. All right. Next, we will receive a report from Dr. Teresa Battle, Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Hume and members of the board. As you know, February has fewer days than other months, but it is chock full of celebrations. So I'm going to take a moment to acknowledge them. As our student representative said, it is Black History Month, a time to honor and celebrate the achievement and contributions of Black Americans throughout history and continuing today. I'm always happy to see important figures centered in instruction and programs, and even happier to know that Black history is not only taught in February, but rather 365 days out of the year as part of our school year curriculum and in our summer programming. February is also I Love to Read Month. Literacy is foundational to education, and we certainly promote and celebrate reading all year long in our schools. But this month gives the schools an opportunity to plan fun activities and really engage students in reading in unique ways, especially reading for enjoyment. And board members, I do encourage you to connect with your schools and participate, if possible, over the next couple of weeks. This week, February 6th through 10th, is National School Counseling Week. And our school counselors play a vital and crucial role in helping students achieve school success, from exploring their class options to helping them finding their strengths and pursuing their passions, applying for colleges, internships, and scholarships, and many things in between. I am incredibly thankful for the dedication of our school counselors and for all they do. Last but not least, February is also Minnesota School Board Appreciation Month. So I want to take the moment to thank and recognize each of you for your work and your dedication to our school community, our larger community, our staff, our students, and external partners. School board members are an essential voice from our community. They provide local oversight for our most important public service, and they ensure that the community's values and needs are reflected in schools and programs. School board members selflessly devote their knowledge, their talents, and a significant amount of their time to their roles as advocates for our students, families, and ambassadors in our community, and for our talented staff. Our students do benefit every day from your hard work and dedication. So on behalf of myself, staff, students, and the entire 191 community, thank you, thank you, thank you for your service as members of the District 191 Board of Education. And that concludes my report for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. Do any board members have questions or comments?
Pat yourself on the back.
Thank you. Last, we will receive reports from board members. Do any board members wish to share a report? Director Connor.
Okay, this is from AMSD, our February meeting. It was just mostly comprised of government proposals from our governor. Our state that's right. Proposals from our governor of what he plans to do for our schools. The schools, he plans to have early childhood education programs. Teachers, these are all just proposals. Teachers and all school workers will collect unemployment over the summer as seasonal workers. He plans on having a program for career readiness, or putting more funding into career readiness, funding diverse workforce with more teachers of color, having a school safety legislation proposal, which is more broader than just no guns, just banning guns. He plans to make a broader safety program. Prohibiting malicious and sadistic conduct of students. This is another proposal that he's doing for teachers. And to make sure that there's, that we prohibit anyone that, any conduct of students that inhibit race, color, creed, origin, sex, and et cetera. And then also universal school lunches, which I'm sure you've all heard of in the news by now. I also just like to touch, excuse me, on the leadership program for AMSB last month, January, that I went to, and was also with Chairperson Hume, Director Jester, and our Superintendent Battle. And it was very informative. It was, we had a guest speaker. Sorry, my throat is just really dry, and water's not helping. We had a speaker who was awesome, and he, this is him. He was also, has a program on called the Parent Test. I'm sure some of you may have heard of it, and does an awesome job on the program. It's very interesting if you haven't. I think it comes on Wednesday nights. I'm not sure what channel, because I just...
It's on ABC.
Okay, great, because I just always have to watch it because I'm working. Watch it on Hulu. But anyway, very interesting. Good scenarios for parents to learn how to parent better, and all kind of little tests they put on. Really surprising results. So that's just some information, and he's just awesome. It was an awesome conference. And that completes my report.
Thank you. Any others? Director Alt.
Thank you, Chair Hume. Just two events I wanted to report on. I was fortunate to be able to attend an evening of one acts at our high school a couple weeks ago, and it featured the theatrical talents of students from Eagle Ridge, Nicollet, as well as the high school. The high school's one act was competitive, and all the students were incredible. I mean, they're just, the level at which our students are performing and working together and really clearly enjoying it, it's really wonderful to see. And I did attend the winter drumline performance. And yes, it is very competitive, very athletic. I know that this year the outfits it is completely volunteerism on the part of parents. The uniforms that the students are wearing were made by the parent volunteers. The sets are created by the parent volunteers, and the students just were having a great time, just really appreciating the musicality and the movement, and they were definitely competitive. That completes my report.
Thank you. Any others? Director Miller.
As Dr. Battle mentioned, February is Reading Month. I don't remember the exact name, but so I attended a breakfast with a book event at Harriet Bishop on the 3rd, and it was well run, put on by the PTO there. We had 400 people came for breakfast with a book, so it was an excellent event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Me too, yes. It's I Love to Read Month. I was at Ron on Friday for breakfast with the book as well, and parking was a challenge. It was very well attended, and had a really great time. And then in January, Ron had its family night with a dance, and over 300 people were in attendance. So we can finally see how much we had missed having those opportunities when we were in the pandemic, because families were out and missed each other, and it was a well attended community event for families. My daughter had a blast. I was a parent wallflower.
That's probably their preference. Thank you. Last call for any other board updates. All right. Moving on, we'll move to the business portion of the board meeting, starting with the consent agenda. Although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussion on these items. In the event a board member wishes to discuss an item, that item will be moved for separate consideration. Do board members wish to remove any items from the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Director Alt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Marsal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. The first item under new business is to approve the bid results and proposal from, is it Doral Construction? Do you know how to pronounce that? I will go with Doral Construction in the amount of $869,600 for the boiler replacement and loading dock concrete replacement project at William Byrne Elementary. Stacy Sovine, Executive Director of Administrative Services, will be presenting the recommendation. Welcome back, Stacy.
Thank you. Good evening again. Yes, we are bringing to you the recommendation to approve the construction bid of $869,600 for the boiler replacement. On Tuesday, December 20th, 2022, bids were received for the above-mentioned project. We had seven companies provide bids for the work contract. A public meeting was held here at Diamond Head Education Center, and the bids were opened up at that point. And the lowest bid, as well as the add-ons, was selected with the, how'd you end up pronouncing it? Doral Construction?
That's how I pronounced it,
All right,
yeah.
that works for me. Won the bid for the project. So it is the recommendation that the Board of Education approve the bid results and proposal from Doral Construction in the amount of $869,600 for the boiler replacement and loading dock concrete replacement project at William Byrne Elementary.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Moved by Director Connor. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Chester. Any discussion? Director Alt.
Thank you, Chair Hume. Would you elaborate on the two adds to the project?
Well, the initial project, as I understand it, was just for the boiler replacement. But not only are we replacing the boiler, then we have like the loading dock that has to be redesigned because of the way it's an outbuilding. But then we also have the tank that needs to be removed, the fuel tank underground. So all of this kind of rolled into the total package that occurred with that. So this is the construction portion. We do have the additional fees and taxes that goes along with that, plus the architectural portion that goes along with this. Again, this comes from our long-term facility maintenance. This was one of the items that we tacked on this year specifically to be able to address the boiler there. Now, if you recall, during our levy certification, we moved forward about $2 million. We weren't sure what the price was going to be coming in on this. The money that isn't going specifically to William Byrne is being redirected to other projects, primarily the Nicollet cafeteria and kitchen redesign.
Well, great. I know that that boiler has been a bit of a challenge for the folks in that school, so glad we can get that fixed and have some money left over to invest elsewhere.
Everybody will be wearing knit shirts and shorts from here on out at William Byrne.
If only.
If only.
Thank you. Any other questions? Director Miller.
The resolution refers to a public meeting that was held here at Diamond Head. Was there public comment as part of that meeting?
Not public comment. It was open to the public. Anybody could have joined us and witnessed the opening of the bid proposals.
Okay, but it was not a question and answer session?
No.
Okay,
No.
that's all then.
Yep.
Any others? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Stacy. Next, we are being asked to approve the 2022-23 revised budget, providing all funds revenues of $183,913,084, and all funds expenditures of $185,621,470. Stacy Sylvine will be presenting this item as well.
As we discussed earlier through my presentation on the revised budget, at this point, we are asking you to approve the revised budget with our updated numbers based off of our audit results, based off of current expenditures and revenue, to kind of move us a little bit closer to actuals as we look to wrap up the fiscal year. To swing back around, Director Miller, to answer your question on other local funds, according to the state of Minnesota, they include transfers among school districts, fees for student activities, sales such as the school meals fees for families that don't qualify for free or reduced meals, and a la carte items, and certain local source revenues such as taconite funds and county apportionment.
Taconite funds.
There you go. So
Thank you.
those are the different items that roll into
That's
local.
what I anticipated, something like that.
Iron ore.
Okay. With that information and with the PowerPoint that we provided before, it is my recommendation that the Board of Education approves the 2022-2023 revised budget, providing all funds revenues of $183,913,084 and all funds expenditures of $185,621,470.
Thank you, Stacy. Is there a motion to approve this agenda item?
So moved.
Moved by Director Chester,
Second.
seconded by Director Werb. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thanks again, Stacy. Next, we're being asked to approve the joint power agreement with the Minnesota Department of Education to implement the class teacher-child interaction observation instrument for early education. Stacy Sylvine is presenting the recommendation.
So, in talking with community ed in early childhood, we have used the class assessment and evaluation system for a number of years already within the district. The joint power agreement is really with the state of Minnesota, the Department of Education, and our district, where they are going to provide up to $10,000 additional professional development. Also, in return, be able to observe us in using the program, gather research and data for their purposes. So it's kind of a joint benefit for both parties. Working with the department, they have a very formal process in which to document this, thus our joint powers agreement. So it is my recommendation that the Board of Education approve the joint powers agreement with the Minnesota Department of Education to implement the class teacher-child interaction observation instrument for early education.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve this agenda item?
So moved.
Moved by Director Werb, and I think it was Director Alt that I heard simultaneously, so
Second.
perfect. All right. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Stacy. Next, we're being asked to approve the strategic roadmap dashboard. Superintendent Dr. Bada will be presenting this recommendation.
Thank you, Chair Hume and members of the board, and I must apologize to my colleagues on the Iron Range that I could not remember. It was taconite, not the legacy funds. With that, I am bringing forward a recommendation that the board approve the strategic roadmap dashboard. If you remember at your last board meeting, the strategic roadmap steering committee and I presented the profile of learning as well as the draft dashboard. These are our metrics to determine the success of the district's implementation of our 4 strategic directions, creating space and opportunity for each and every voice to be heard, actively leading by developing and sustaining a diverse and equitable education system, supporting and leveraging innovation to improve student outcomes and district culture, and lastly, engaging our community so that they really do have a common understanding of our work, especially the strategic roadmap. This does include, the dashboard does include those mandated metrics that you're accustomed to for the world's best workforce, as well as the achievement and integration success metrics. And with that, I recommend that the board approves the strategic roadmap dashboard.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve this agenda item?
So moved.
Moved by Director Miller,
Second.
seconded by Director Chester. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Dr. Battle. Next, we're being asked to approve on a first reading basis changes to Policy 613, graduation requirements. Amina Aftadal, Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment, will be presenting the recommendation. Welcome, Amina.
Director Hume, Superintendent Battle, members of the board. I'm presenting to you for its first reading the revisions of Policy 613, which is graduation requirements. Many of the changes that have been made are to eliminate outdated language for graduating classes that are older than 7 years in the past, eliminate language that is no longer required by statute, such as the grad assessment, and to reiterate that our local requirements of 46 credits remains in place. And so we have included language that references the state requirements for college and career readiness planning, and I think updated then the legal references for those. So I would recommend approval of this policy after it's been reviewed. It has been reviewed by the Policy Review Committee.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve this agenda item?
So moved.
Moved by Director Miller.
Second.
Second, was that Director Mersong? Yes. Oh, great. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Amina.
Thank you.
The next item we are being asked to approve on a first reading basis is changes to Policy 705, investments. Stacy Silvine will be presenting this recommendation. Welcome back, Stacy.
The binder is getting smaller. So, bringing to you the first reading 705 for investments. This policy was reviewed by the Policy Review Committee on January 24th, 2023. The summary of the changes from MSBA is that they are updating references and other reporting requirements. Just as you probably peruse through here, you see different language talking about an investment officer and such. We are not recommending that we're adding another position to the district. Our investments are managed by an outside firm, PMA Financial. They provide us many of these resources already on a monthly basis, and then also are submitted on our board reports, I believe, on a monthly basis as well. So this is general policy from MSBA. If we were to ever move and start managing our own investments, we would have the policy in place to be able to do so. But at this point, we are using an advisor to take care of this thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is there a motion to approve this agenda item?
So moved.
Moved by Director Connor, second by Director Alt. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thanks again, Stacy. And the next item on the agenda is to approve on a first reading basis changes to Policy 602, Organization of the School Year Calendar. Dr. Chris Belmont, Assistant Superintendent, will be presenting the recommendation. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Hume, Dr. Battle, Board of Education. I'm here to ask for approval on a first reading basis to changes to Policy 602, the organization of our school calendar. This policy, which was reviewed by the Policy Review Committee on January 24th of this year, features some closer alignment to the Minnesota School Board Association recommendations, as well as legal references and text. You'll see some additions that allow the board some more discretion for starting before Labor Day if they choose to, based on varying circumstances, including namely capital projects. Other than that, there are not a lot of substantive changes. And I think we're kind of eyeing up the March 23rd meeting to present to the board recommendations for a new 24-25 school calendar. So we'll make sure that it's aligned to this policy if it's adopted.
Thank you. All right, is there a motion to approve this agenda item?
So moved.
Moved by Director Werb,
Second.
seconded by Director Alt. Any discussion?
I have a
Director
question.
Connor?
I just have a question. I was wondering under number 5, the e-learning days, under B, number B, it says the school district may designate up to 5 e-learning days. I was just wondering why we decided to limit just up to 5.
That's a great question. So we, by state law, we can have up to 5. So that is the maximum of e-learning days allowed. Now, we are able to have blended learning days, which Ava kind of alluded to for yesterday for our 11th and 12th graders, while our 9th and 10th graders were engaged in pre-ACT assessment. And those blended learning days are afforded to us because we've been an approved online vendor with the state. So every district has up to 5 for those weather-related e-learning days. We've had 2.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That's it.
Knock on wood that we don't have any more. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question.
Okay, Director Werb.
So if you could maybe clarify when you said ability to make adjustments to starting prior to Labor Day due to capital projects, what would that be?
Sure, and there's some more specific language added, but so maybe the most common way I've seen it, I've seen this state statute used by districts is if they have a major capital project that needs to occur and there's concern that it can't get done within the summer months, that you could have school you could have school start before Labor Day, maybe 3rd or 4th week in August, and then that would therefore end school earlier to give that springtime more of a chance for our construction workers to get it done, to then start on time for the
Planning
following
for the
year.
following summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I had a visual to show you,
Right.
but that's how I've seen it most
Okay.
commonly used.
That helps because I was like, I don't know what that means.
I know, it's complicated.
Dr. Battle
Thank
may
you.
have an additional comment.
So Chair Hume, members of the board, and Director Werb, there is a dollar amount of the projects also, I believe, in the statute. But yes, so that's why some Minnesota districts get out the last week in May, and you wonder
Oh,
why?
okay. Yes.
Because they start before Labor Day, so they have to meet the exceptions.
Okay.
But the state law says we should not start before Labor
Right.
Day.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you for correcting that, the end of May.
Any others? All right, I have 2 comments related to this. First, thank you for the clarification, because I was also wondering, why would they start early if they're in the middle of a project? But it makes sense that they're planning ahead for the following summer. So thank you for that. And then also, just to be clear for anyone who may be watching from home, this language around starting before Labor Day is what comes from MSBA. It's not that we are saying that we're gonna be starting early.
No, this just allows for it if the policy ever occurs.
If there was a reason that met the
yeah,
standards.
Yep, and I'm not aware of that happening right now, and Dr. Battle did allude to the, that remodeling project figure of $400,000.
Great. Thank you very much. If there's no further Oh, sorry, Director Connor. I missed you.
Sorry, I just thought of one other question. So this is just because I noticed, I remember last year we voted on the calendar for 3 years. Is this just for the next year?
So, this is a great question. Right now, we have our calendar approved up through next year, 2024. And so the policy just calls for us to make sure that we're coming to the board seeking approval. I believe it's in November prior to that following school year starting. So we have met that timeline for next year. And then right now, our calendar committee is working to make sure we're getting ahead of that for 24, 25, and then 25, 26.
Okay.
Sometimes committees have come with 2-year bans. Right now, it's not really our plan, but
Okay.
we'll make sure we're following the policy as it.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Thank you. Just had a moment when you said 24, 25, because that's my son's senior year, and my youngest, exactly.
Yeah,
So it's a
it's
little.
giving me a moment too.
Yeah, I'll bet. You knew him. All right, on that note, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the last agenda item is to approve on a first reading basis changes to Policy 104, School District Mission Statement. Aaron Tinklenberg, Director of Communications, will be presenting the recommendation. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Chair Hume, Dr. Battle, and members of the board. Here seeking approval for changes to Policy 104, School District Mission Statement. The changes that you see reflected here are primarily to simplify and clarify the policy a little bit. We're recommending removing the statement of core values and the vision statement from the policy and instead referencing our strategic roadmap. Similarly, removing the responsibilities section and consolidating that in the general statement of policy where the board and superintendent responsibilities both lie. And then clarifying the review section just to make it clear what's being reviewed when, rather than previously the language was a little confusing about what would be done when.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve this agenda item?
So moved.
Moved by Director Chester,
Second.
seconded by Director Werb. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. This concludes the regular board meeting. The time is 7:27. We'll adjourn to a workshop about the FY24 preliminary budget discussion, but I think first we'll take a 10-minute break. Sound good? I know. So, well, we're done early, so 10-minute break. We will get started. Welcome back, Stacy
All right.
and Dr. Battle.
One last go.
His binder is near empty.
I am ready if you are.
So, thank you, Chair Hume and members of the board. Before Stacy, Amina, and I go through the presentation tonight, I did want to set some context for the preliminary information for fiscal year '24, share some information about our assumptions and our approach and some of the reasoning behind this, our approach, and we look forward to your discussion and any questions or comments you might have. So, first, I'd like to say that some things will be different this year from previous years, and for one primary reason. We are in a more stable and a more optimistic financial position than in recent years. And I believe this is thanks to good planning. When I bring my recommendation for budgets to you, some decisions you have made, your very judicious use of federal pandemic relief funds, our stable enrollment compared to last year, even though it is not a trend, and the expected increase of funding from the state over the next 2 years. That said, as I mentioned about the enrollment, it is not a trend yet. I do urge us to be cautious and to be very flexible as we move forward. As you know, the federal pandemic relief will go away next year, and state aid is never guaranteed until the end of the session, and it is signed, the omnibus bill is signed by Governor Walz. I do believe my approach and my goal is to have long-term stability. As you know, our students and our families really value our programming. We heard from our student rep today about the wonderful student agency to have those activities and opportunities during the school day. And so keeping that in mind as we prepare for this upcoming budget season for fiscal year '24. And with that, lastly, we do take a values and priorities-based budgeting approach. We're going to focus on those priorities of the strategic roadmap that you as a board has approved, and that includes our commitment to becoming a pre-K-12 pathways district. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Executive Director Stacy Sovine, and also joining me tonight will be Director Amina Oftedal.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Battle, for those opening statements. Covered a lot of different points, and some of those points are addressed in the different slides. So if we move through a slide fairly quickly, because we've already discussed that. Just our budget approach moving forward, we will be looking at our strategy, the process, preliminary, let me get our slide going there. Preliminary budget assumptions. We're also going to be taking into consideration our audited results for FY22 and the revised budget for FY23 that you just approved, and then kind of looking at the high level, our next steps as we move towards June to approve our adopted budget for FY24. Guiding questions, again, we are still using a guiding change document as we go through this process. Oopsie daisy, I shouldn't have clicked that. No, well, I tried to click the link and I went, there we go. So we have a driving question is that given 191 strategic roadmap requires that the district optimize resources for student learning, how will the budget for FY24 continue to support our mission and priorities? Positioning the budget to leverage every funding source available. How does the budget align with the goals of advancing equitable student outcomes and the district's strategic directions? That is pretty much our driving question as we start putting this together. Then we have three basic columns in which we have different components. What is our current reality? What are the unacceptable means that the not hows we're going to try to do this? And then what are the desired results? How will we know this is kind of our vision, this is the direction in which we're wanting to go? So those are kind of the three different fence posts that we use to guide our work and develop our options as we move forward. I'm not going to read all of the different items within that, but that is there for the public to review and yourself as well. So again, prioritizing our investments for instructional priorities, especially our K-12 pathways, maintaining current class size parameters. We often refer to that as right sizing, but really kind of flipping that a little bit, just we are not adding, we are not making cuts, we are just maintaining our class sizes that have been board approved. So with a declining enrollment, that feels like a cut, but when we had to add, like we did this fall, we were maintaining class sizes. We were right sizing. So it goes both directions. So it doesn't always need to have a negative connotation. How we use our restricted funds before general undesignated funds, also understanding the ebb and flow of revenue streams and expenses. I'm bringing to this position a mindset very much like I use with our self-funded plan. You heard me many times as we talked about we will continue to build up our reserve and our self-funded insurance because we will have those high claim years. So to try to maintain the percentage, the cost of it over time, instead of having hills and valleys, we want to try to have a much more level approach to things. So as we look at our budget, we are not necessarily going to be using the term a balanced budget, because a balanced budget in the concept, expenditures match revenues, or they don't exceed. But that doesn't take into effect what next year, the following year, the upcoming years may bring to us. So we want to make sure that we are looking at budgeting in a format that is sustainable over time. So as we go through our presentation, you're going to see we are going to get additional revenue that is going to elevate our fund balance. However, keep in mind that also our ESSER funds in the next little over a year will be expiring. So if we don't plan for when those funds move away, then we're left with nothing but to do cuts. So my view on this is we're going to build up so that when those funds go away, we will have multiple years in which to continue to work within our budget without having severe cuts at any one point in time our programming. Also, if our enrollment continues to increase or maintain, those will be positive adds as well. Okay, so you'll see that ebb and flow and also that sustainable budget approach, which I talked a little bit going into the last bullet. How we use our categorical funds.
So much of the presentation tonight is going to be about stabilizing our funding, being strategic about where we put our dollars. We also know that at the heart of that are our instructional priorities and recognizing that the investments that we're making are about strengthening, expanding, and growing our instructional programs. And so when we think about what those key pieces are, we do have the core of our 5 goals from the world's best workforce, beginning with our youngest learners all the way through to graduation. Considering achievement and integration paired with our equity and cultural proficiency, knowing that as an organization we continue to move toward more equitable systems and that we become and continue to expand our cultural proficiency in our instruction, in our policy, and in all levels of our organization. And then our K-12 pathway school, which is in the center of our world's best workforce goals, our achievement integration goals, and our equity and cultural proficiency. The pre-K-12 pathways is really about offering students those experiences from earliest learners to explore, to spark and examine possibilities for themselves, to offer them the hope and to offer them the skills and the education that they need in order to drive themselves towards those goals that will help them achieve their greatest potentials, all the way up to our college and career pathways at our high schools. And so by investing in things and keeping these at the center of the way that we look at budgeting, the way that we look at our finance and our fiscal responsibilities, we know that investments around these instructional priorities will continue to be the benefit of our community and of each and every single one of our learners.
Thank you. How did we maintain class sizes? So for elementary, our K-5 average target is 24.5 students in grades kindergarten through fifth. Kindergarten having the smaller size classes, fifth grade would have the larger size classes. This is a district-wide average. You will not go into every building, every grade, every class and find only 25 students. Some of the grades will be more maxed out, more efficient, we look at as being closer to their target size, while other buildings may have much fewer students and the class sizes are smaller with that. Okay. Right now, our average for K-5 is just under 23 students. Part of that reason is because we are using our ESSER funds to offset and have smaller class sizes at the elementary levels, specifically kindergarten, first and second grade. Okay. The middle school average is 21 students per FTE, not class size, this is per FTE. Both the middle school and the high school fall within that mid-20 range, though, when you look at the average as far as class size. The reason I make this distinction, we actually have a fairly large formula that we use for general allocation that goes to both sites. But then, though, the general allocation is supplemented with EL services, special ed services, compensatory money that is provided, school within a school funding, and I just lost one of them, and it'll come back to me near the end of the presentation. But once you start adding all of those other services and all of those other teachers, students start going to different areas, which kind of dilutes the class size average because they're receiving the specialized services. Okay. So our class sizes are, and then also when you look at the state report card, you'll see that the number of students per teachers, we are very low for the region. So as we talked about a little bit earlier, we do adjust our instructional full-time equivalency, our FTEs, based upon enrollment and those board-approved class size averages. We also sometimes adjust our FTEs based upon the funding source. Title I, if we were to see a decline in title or an increase in title, the FTEs that go along with that may change as well. So if we see an increase in our title funding that we are able to distribute back to the buildings, they may then also be able to hire more teachers as a result. If the state were to pull back, those positions may fall back as well. Compensatory and title are supplemental. They're not supplanting our allocation to the buildings. Each building receives the same type of allocation based upon pupils, but not each building will receive the same amount of title funds. That is building specific for free and reduced based upon that building's population. So our federal pandemic relief money, the purpose for that was relief, recovery, and to rebound. It addresses both our health needs, physical, mental, social, and emotional, connection to school, digital outcomes, and effective learning opportunities. Going through that process on the front end, we did receive stakeholder feedback regarding those priorities that then was submitted to the state for approval, and that is the basic plan that we've been working off for the last 2 years. If there's any adjustments, we do have to take that back to the state, notify them, and they will still have to reapprove it for us to be able to receive those funds for the charges that we are giving them. So our budget process, each year our Director of Finance sits down, meets with the different departments, meets with the principals, goes through their budgets, makes sure that everything is what lines up for both parties, that they're seeing what they expect to see. Identifying priority expenditures, that right now is occurring a little bit more casual than what it has in the past, but the executive leadership team, along with Dr. Battle, has started to compile a list of different requests that have come our way as far as, hey, we have a need for, well, one of those needs would be EL teachers for next year. With the increase with our newcomers, we're adding on to our EL. Looking for, with digital security and the networking for technology, we'll be looking at a position in that area as well. One of the things that's very intriguing to us at this point in time is our behavior analyst. through ESSER funds, we actually assigned a behavior analyst, hired and assigned a behavior analyst to Nicollet Middle School. We're seeing really great results there. Not only great results with the student behaviors, but other results that trickle into other areas that we're going to use as metrics as well. My teacher absenteeism at Nicollet has declined. My sub-fill rate at Nicollet has increased. So as we're seeing changes in the student behaviors, it's also trickulating out through other areas that's impacting the building as a whole. We are seeing some really good things occurring at Nicollet right now. So that's with the leadership that's there. It's also with the addition, we believe, with a behavior analyst. So we're going to kind of target in on things like that. Where do we get the best return on investment that impacts us in multiple different areas? How do we assign different types of positions? So those are considerations that we're looking at as well. Discretionary funds, making decisions, identifying cost savings, submitted budget adjustments, or a request for additional funding. I just talked about that a little bit. Again, this is kind of trickulating up to the executive leadership team. We have also opened up the portal for recommendations. So if folks wanted to go online, say, hey, we'd like to see this, that is available. That will be pushed out to staff as well in the update, I believe, tomorrow. Yep, but it is available now. So our adopted budget timeline, we brought to you here in January, February, the 23 revised budget, receiving a report right now on our assumptions moving forward. In March, we hope to bring you a little bit more specifics as to what's going on at the state level with funding updates and how they may play into our budget. Also, that list that I was kind of talking to you about, bringing that back to you as far as some budget recommendations or additions that we may be putting into place for this. And then we get into the detail work moving forward, and then we'll be able to bring a final budget through a workshop in June, and then the final proposal by the end of June, which we are required to do by law. Stop. So I'm going to break this down into different portions of the assumption, our local, our state, and our federal aid. Our local aid, we've already passed our levy certification, which is going to be about an increase of $6 million. Okay, so that's a known. That's there. Part of that was also looking at our FY23 enrollment projection was around 7,200. We actually are around 7,457 as of January 16th. That number is actually closer to 7,465 as of Monday. So we are looking at a decline, slight decline. I just can't get that out of my nature. But we are looking at a slight decline for next year. Primarily what we're looking at is a smaller kindergarten class coming in year over year, okay? This year, every other grade saw an increase. So that was really good to see. Only kindergarten had the slight decline. And again, we're looking at that as birth rates are declining, but we are going to get more information on that as well. We had a demographic study done in 2013. We are currently undergoing another 10-year cycle. We will have that information probably by mid-March as to what the next 10 years will look like for the student population here in the district. Okay. Again, we talked about the $6 million increase in levy aid. Compensatory revenue, we will see an increase in that next year. We are also assuming the stuff in italics is kind of up to what happens at through this whole process. Our conservative number is a 3% increase on the general education formula, and we are assuming a $5 million increase on cross subsidies for special education and English learners combined, okay? We are, again, these are conservative numbers probably, but these are strong enough that we should be able to get started with. Federal aid, one of the things, we still have another year of federal aid. That'll expire in the fall of 25. That will be a decrease of about $8 million So next year, we'll still have about $8 million roughly in that area that we'll be spending. Just be aware of that.
Stacy, did you say that it ends in the fall of 25 or 24?
So we are going into fiscal year '24.
Right. The ESSER funding, I mean.
Fall of '24.
That's what I thought.
Fall of '24.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt.
Nope. Not good with numbers, thank you. Just a little trouble.
But some will expire
So
September.
that's kind of a requisite of the
September.
job.
23, like the summer learning.
Yeah,
That
we'll have,
ends summer.
Right.
which will be in
2022,
FY '25.
September. Right,
Yes.
so the last
Right.
allocation.
Okay.
As much as possible, because of all of the reporting requirements and everything else that goes along with that, we are going to try to use everything up in FY '24 if possible. Combined revenue increase is approximately $17 million for FY '24, given those three different areas. So our expenditure assumptions, we are looking at a 2.5% salary increase on the schedules. Not a total increase, but on each cell of the schedule. We know that in our contract, we have a 6% transportation increase. We are looking at potentially as high as 18% increase on utilities because of inflationary costs, 5% increase on supplies, materials. Again, we talked about this earlier, at least a 9% increase on medical insurance premiums, and also knowing that our ESSER 3 funds for all additional positions to continue, that there are those ongoing expenditures as well. So overall, next year, we're going to see an increase of about $9 million to our expenditures. Okay? So we have $17 million of new money. We have $9 million of new expenses. So kind of putting that into the box on the right for you. So our fund balance, we'll be looking at projected close to an $8 million increase. So we'll be moving from a $32.5 million fund balance, as we have on our revised budget at this point in time, to about 40.5. This is high level. All of those different areas will start kind of breaking down into restricted, unassigned, all of the different areas. But at this point in time, I'm just giving you the 30,000-foot level, okay? And again, we know that our compensatory is a fixed number, our local levy is fixed number. What we don't know is that $7 to $8 million from the state, if that'll be higher, if that'll be right on, or lower. That's the number we're not sure about. I do want to point out, if you look on the far right column under revised budget for FY '23, when I talked about we're looking forward, those revenues there total about $10 million for ESSER. This is FY '23. Next year it'll be a little bit less because we're front loading what we're spending. And then you see the expenditures under the federal, which is about $6 million, okay? So through the process, we have been spending money to supplement and to supplant. So supplementing would be like that behavior analyst position that I was discussing at Nicollet. That was supplementing. That's something that we didn't have before, that we felt that we had a need, and we put that out there. We also were supplanting about $3.2, $3.4 million of current expenses with ESSER so that we didn't have to go into budget reduction. The 3.4 supplanting number is the number that we need to keep an eye on. That's why we're building the budget up, because that will be the number in which we will, if we want to maintain everything we have, which will start becoming the draw against our fund balance over the next few years. Okay? Now, again, if revenue increases, student enrollment increases, that gets mitigated. Okay? Then the question falls back to, with everything that we are supplementing, that $3.2, $3.4 million, what services might we want to continue? We're not going to necessarily need to maintain everything, but again, if we see a real return on investment in certain areas, we may say that needs to become a part of our programming going forward. So those will be some of the conversations or some of the things that we're looking at. What we are trying to do is to develop a budget so that we are able to, again, have time to make sure that we are utilizing all of the resources we have. The programming isn't, is it in flux? Do we have this year? Are we not going to have it next? We want to have stability over time. That's why we are moving in this direction at this point. Okay? And that are my assumptions for you.
That's it. We cautious, but optimistic.
Just the way I like things. Thank you. Board members, do any of you have comments or questions at this point, I imagine? Looks like Eric does.
Go if you want, yeah.
Go for it.
Optimistic is a understatement compared to previous years. This is good news. I mean, assuming we, as you said, this is very early. Starting with the adopted budget process, first slide, I guess, in that talking point, bullet points, each budget manager is responsible. Identify cost savings. I'd be curious a little bit on your feeling around that statement. We've done a lot of cost-saving exercises, changed out the printers, went to LED light bulbs, whatever, over the last few years. So I'm partially a little skeptical there's a lot left to wring out of the reg, but.
We are very lean and mean in many areas. One of the things that we continue to do is to look year over year as to what was allocated on the different budget lines to see if there were any expenditures in those areas. So we're not just leaving breadcrumbs sitting in a corner that could be used in other areas, okay? Not that anybody necessarily wants breadcrumbs, but other resources. But also know that sometimes money is set aside because you may have once in a decade or once every 5-year type of events. Best example I can give with that is our legal fees. I may go multiple years without a large need to tap into legal fees, but every few years, sometimes we do have a high case or a high event that does take a lot of resources from us. So could we tap into that? Could we pull those resources out? We could. Then once every 5 years, potentially, we would be scrambling to offset that. But there are times where you have money, it's like, oh, this was set aside for a special project H, whatever that may be, and we did it once and nobody ever thought to not do, we're not doing it anymore, and we haven't done it for many years. Well, that's what pops out in those types of things. And it may be $1,000, $1,500 at a shot that starts adding up. Again, the other thing, and we're looking a little bit over the horizon with this, but if we see that we do get a return on an investment on a certain type of position as a behavior analyst, it starts impacting our sub rates. It starts impacting our, well, quite frankly, it impacts our medical insurance because of the different stress factors that are caused and the time off that is needed, as well as students and the instruction that they're receiving in the class because they're able to stay in the classroom and the whole system starts lifting up. Well, do I need as many deans? I'm saving on my medical cost. I'm saving on my sub costs. So those kind of are the things that additional savings might occur if we can find those leverage points for our staffing that may help with those.
Okay.
So it may not always be cuts, it just may be how do we get a return on investment in different areas.
Okay. Moving down to the budget revenue assumption slide, state aid, 3% increase, general fund formula, and $5 million on the cross subsidies. Historically, I think since I've been here, it's typically more like a 1 or 2%. I appreciate the current climate. It tends to lend itself to, I also believe, if I remember right, your predecessor at this point typically zeroed that out. Or didn't she? I can't remember.
Yep, it was
Yeah, it was
zero,
always
yeah.
zero.
0 or 1.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's fine. I'm only just drawing attention to the, we don't get too far over our skis, I guess. But, I mean, I am certainly hopeful that 3 is actually undervaluing it from what I'm led to believe listening to the media, but.
Yeah, and I do believe that it is actually fairly conservative when
Yes,
the
it
governor's
is.
proposal is 4%. AMSD, MSBA are both advocating for 5%. I mean, these are some fairly significant numbers. So I'm at the low side, and I'm only looking at 2 areas. They have a whole lot of other areas that they're wanting to throw into the education funding that I'm not even taking into account. So those areas I'm kind of zeroing
How
out.
does the 5 million increase across subsidies reflect I don't even, I just know the gap. I haven't paid much attention to, I mean, we haven't seen an increase year over year in that past, right, at all, right?
Oh,
No,
no.
the gap continues to.
Yeah, it was because of like 25 or something like that for
Fairly
us currently, I
significant
think.
for us. Yeah, I don't know if it's 25. I think that's our total cost. I'm thinking it's closer to around 13, 15.
That would put a nice dent in it. Okay.
So that also is based on the Governor Walsh's proposal.
Yeah.
So his proposal is to reduce the cross subsidy for districts by 50%. And so we've looked at our local, it may be 44%. We're doing an estimate. We really have to wait to MDE if it passes to give our district runs. And then for English learner,
It's not a very big number.
it's
It
not.
won't
It's
be.
a different formula. So
Okay.
that's why this is an estimate until MDE legislature passed, the governor signs it, and then they give us our district runs. So currently, the cross subsidy is, I thought it was 10 million, 7 million special ed, and 3 million in EL.
Yeah, some,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So-
that's what that's based on.
Okay.
50%, every district reduce your cross subsidy by 50% for special ed. That's in his proposal.
Okay. Down to expenditure assumptions, 6% transportation increase. Remind me, I thought we do like 2-year contracts with them, is that?
We have a multiple-year contract with Schmitty and Sons, and each year has a specific percentage that has
So
been
that's a
identified.
baked-in,
That's already
known
baked in.
increase?
Yep.
Okay, because I know the last round, we did take a fairly sizable upswing. And admittedly, they came to the table fairly low to gain our business, understandable, but, okay. So that's a baked-in cost. 18 on utilities, that's a dramatic increase. Is there something there that we've been forewarned about, or?
Well,
Well,
my
oil
favorite
and gas
example
is
is the
expensive, yeah.
the
the
gas
gas bill.
prices. Tell them about how much we pay when the gas prices, the oil goes up.
Well, anything over $3, we pay also a surcharge for transportation for the gas.
Well,
I
no,
get
no,
that.
I'm not talking about the 18% increase on utilities.
Yeah, but utilities, the electric bills as well as
Electric.
our gas and oil for our boilers and such,
Yeah.
that has increased significantly for us. And we're still anticipating, we
yeah,
don't see
but
that going
that's
backwards
a
with our
sizable
current fuel
increase.
cost.
Okay.
That's why we're just, that's hedging. That's probably a little bit ambitious,
I believe
but
it might be, but that's okay, that's, all right. And then on the last, on the current reality slide, revised budget's gonna have, I'm really interested in the balance, fund balance percentage. We're landing at 14.5% revised budget setting. So if we are taking up our fund balance arguably significantly with this, in this scenario, do we have any idea where the percentage will be landing in that?
yeah, it'd be right around 20, a little over 20%.
That's amazing. For those that aren't aware, a handful of years ago, we were debating whether we'd allow it to go down to like 2, wasn't it, or something like that? Yeah, that would be significantly impressive if we could accomplish that, so.
And again, I want to be very careful with this.
I do.
You understand.
There's a
We're
massive
not
grain of
looking
salt
to
involved here,
amass
but-
resources to sit on them.
Saving for the proverbial rainy day.
Yes, we're the squirrels at this point in time, getting ready for winter. So that's kind of, we're pulling in the resources so that we can get through the winter months going forward as they may come.
And I mentioned earlier about decision-making of the board, and so one of the major decisions was my first year is going out for the levy, and we have to thank our voters. It was for 10 years, and we tied it to inflation. Some districts did not.
Yep.
So it's really this partnership between us and these decisions. But as you know, it can turn our economy. So.
Okay, that's all from me.
Thank you. Abigail?
Thank you. Comments and questions. I appreciate the conservative approach. This is an entirely different landscape than, and it's going to involve a little bit of a mind shift, at least for me, because, and I'm sure for many others, right? It's a real change. So it's kind of awkward looking at these numbers, and I appreciate the conservative approach. I appreciate that, knowing that there might be additional funding coming our way, and you're still keeping our estimates low. I think that's great, because that's what this board has always done, and we've done well for our students that way. Detail question, demographer study. Do we have the demographer already working on it? Who is the demographer?
Hazel,
It is Hazel?
it'll be Hazel again.
It'll be Hazel,
Yep.
all right.
He's still doing this.
Okay.
Now, just one thing I'll indicate, Hazel Reinhardt has been known for doing this service for all districts across the state for years. And her projections, the numbers that she had as far as our residents, potential students, has been darn close to what we actually have in the district. Again, this brings us back to another conversation with our open enrollment. That's not something you can project, but the base amount in which you can pull from, that's what she'll help us with.
So the numbers we were working on was 2013 was the last report.
Yep.
So
It
we've
expired
had
this
a
year.
pandemic.
Yeah.
Yep.
It expires this year. And so that's part of the work operations does with the enrollment projection is to get that 10-year. And as you know, the birth rate, we'll see what happens. And also the other piece was we had the census too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
and the other part of the consideration that she puts into this, and we're working with Director Lake, are the number of units that are within our school district, meaning apartments, homes, different places for residents. And that number has changed dramatically. So that will be also calculated into the process here as we go forward.
Well, suffice it to say, I'll be interested to see what she comes back with. Let's see. Okay, you already asked that question. Looking at the guiding change document, under realities, it says, Virtual Academy launched in FY22, assessment in progress. And the question is, at what point in FY24 budgeting will we discuss the outcomes of that review to inform our decision-making?
Hoping in March when I bring forward the recommendations. So as we do the assessment, we were looking at the ESSER positions we added, having the impact, looking at if we can have any cost savings, also the digital, working with our insurer for cybersecurity. As you know, they asked us to add some, more protections to keep our insurance. And so also looking at Virtual Academy, because as you know, the enrollment dropped significantly from the pandemic. So that'll all be a part of March. I'll be bringing
That'll be the
forward.
workshop, right? Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
And then it also, the document also mentions that the pre-K pathways identified multi-year investments. And the follow-up question to that is, what about the K-12 pathways? What visibility do we have to how well those are funded? And when will that be coming forward in FY24 budgeting?
So I believe on the consent agenda, you passed the retreat, the board
Yes.
retreat.
Board review for next.
So you'll have more information about our pathways, but yes, that will be a part in March.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And then, just details under the outcome of the budget process. There are a couple edits under number 4 and 5 that I saw. But overall, I think it'll be interesting to hear, how we move forward as a board. One thing I would like to put out there, knowing that and appreciating that you want to, we want to grow our fund balance, is that whatever we choose to do with money that goes into the fund balance, it is a one-time spend, right? It's not, we can't add FTE using fund balance. We need to look at the funding streams that are coming in, because otherwise we're going to be tying our hands if we add in, a certain, say, a new group of FTE using fund balance. That's not sustainable. So that's kind of one thing that I think about as we go through this.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. And like I said, with the growing fund balance as we have it right now, it buys us the gift of time to look for those types of positions, different strategies, ways of setting things up that have a high return on investment. So you may see some ads that are very specific going forward. With the idea that in time, they will actually help eliminate other costs in other areas. So that's kind of that investment thinking. Yes, we have to make sure that, we may not be able to sustain some of these things. We know that the ESSER money is going away. That definitely is one time. But based upon like the governor's proposal, with the built-in inflationary component with that, some of this funding will be continuing. And to Director Miller's point, not getting too far over the skis, but the last thing we also want to do is sit on a lot of money and not provide the services that we're needing.
Completely,
So it's that real fine balance.
It's a fine line, and I think, Stacy, as long as you continue to do a wonderful job with that context and helping connect the dots between that return on investment, and this is what we're suggesting, and this is what, we might be able to expect, no guarantees, but this is kind of what our thinking is. That's really helpful for me.
Good.
All right. Other comments, questions?
No, I appreciate the conservative approach, and I had always voiced caution with the pandemic funds that we shouldn't be supplanting things we would eventually need to be faced with cutting, and that if anything was going to be adding on to get us through, knowing that these might be temporary, so that we weren't going to take those hits. But I appreciate continuing to build up enough savings so that we can do those types of analysis of what we've learned from the benefit of having these dollars that we may want to keep, and maybe giving us time to maybe find a different revenue source that could sustain it, knowing that general fund won't sustain it.
Thanks, Leslie. Do you have anything? You guys are good? Safio, Anna, everything? All right, I just had one or two things. You actually answered most of my questions in the presentation, so thank you for that. I guess one question I had, you mentioned that the budget feedback form is live now, and you said it's going out to staff tomorrow. How is it being communicated with the kind of the general public or being shared?
I don't know that answer.
Oh, I do.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Glad
So
one of you does.
We were waiting for this discussion and for the board to actually see the preliminary. And so we'll be sending out communication. Sometimes the principals say, can we put in our newsletter? Because the parents look at that more sometimes than the district. But we'll make sure not only staff, but the public gets that information too. Yep.
Thank you. Then my only other question, and it's probably more of a hypothetical for tonight, but something I've been wondering about, and I think I might have asked this exact same question a year ago during our first budget retreat or workshop. And that's just, I'm curious about if we would want to consider the possibility of revisiting the class size numbers and what that impact would be on budget and personnel if we did, with the rationale that doing so would presumably benefit our students and our staff. So just something I wonder, something we may want to take a look at in the coming weeks is, not a dramatic decrease in class sizes, but maybe tweak it a bit and just see what that impact might be.
Yeah, Chair Hume, if you remember my first year here, when the budget didn't look so optimistic, the board gave the question increase by one. So
Yes, I remember
we'll
that.
be willing if the
That's-
board gives us what you're wondering
Right.
about.
If I may,
May.
I would suggest a couple of modeling, half a point
Yeah.
difference, that kind of thing, on the numbers, the cost, but I'd also be interested in hearing some professional, maybe some research that's been done on the impact. I know it's an intuitive assumption.
Right.
That going down a percentage would somehow increase outcomes, but I don't know that I'm prepared to
I
be the expert
completely
on that.
agree with you. I just think it would be good to have that discussion, and this seems like the right time to have it as we're talking about budgeting.
I also think it would be helpful, because we know that, with our pathways classes at the high school, we have some pretty small classes. And I think as part of that conversation, if we're talking about the possibility of what it might cost to decrease class sizes, what are the financial implications of those smaller classes so that we understand both? Because those smaller class sizes are definitely an investment
Right.
that we continue to support. And those smaller class sizes obviously trickle, have kind of a ripple effect on the other classes and make them larger. And looking at the information that you shared about, the class sizes at secondary was really helpful because it was very more reassuring, I think, than just simply talking, okay, here's the range. You could kind of see what those class sizes are and that, for high school students, for the most part, and for the staff, it's fairly reasonable. At the same time, what are the benefits?
Right.
Well, I also appreciate understanding too, the benefit of having the additional services in those classrooms. So having special ed.
Right,
Or, because sometimes they're co-taught
Right.
as well. And so that might show that the ratio is a little different for a class size if it's co-taught with two.
May I respond? Okay.
Of course. Please do.
One of the things to remember that we are currently supplementing at the elementary level ESSER money for smaller class sizes. So we have, I believe, 5 FTEs that move us from our 24.5 down to, right now they're at 22.5 just because of some of the inefficiency at points. But even with our preliminary staffing for next year, it'll be right around 23 and a quarter or whatever. So just 5 FTEs. Right now, the salary and benefit average of our teachers is at $114,000. So that's 5 FTEs is 575,000.
And to bring up the instructional part about that at was it last board meeting you heard about the literacy? So I'll be looking at that because if you remember who our kindergartners, first and second graders are and remember their school experience. So when they move up to third grade, so I'll be
Yeah.
bringing my recommendations. I'll be looking at everything because that's the group they really did not have a normal schooling.
Right.
At very critical entry to school.
Yeah.
Not
Just
to
getting started out.
dismiss the other grades. We know our seniors that first year and then the first year after the pandemic. But the littles, socialization, they were isolated, couldn't play with peers. So we're looking at really holistically too.
Well, and also, the students completely agree, because that was kind of a void, and the parents did the best that they could. Students at transitional points, like between middle school and high school, that maybe are still with us, and how are they doing? I mean, is it if it doesn't need to be across the board, right? If there's a targeted group of students that need that additional help more so than maybe others that you can identify, I mean, be creative,
Yep.
to something Director Miller said before.
And my point with that was we are already supplementing, we're exploring some of these smaller class sizes with our ESSER funds. So with the additional fund balance, that's going to allow us to determine, do we maintain? Are we just going to switch the funds over? So it isn't necessarily new cost, it may be just the maintaining of that.
Sure.
But you may be drawing down your fund balance a little bit quicker. So those are going to be some of that's that gift of time.
Yeah.
Does it work for the elementary? Are we seeing the results for that? We have like math specialists that we've added at the middle school. We have credit recovery at the high school that we've added. So we have a number of different things with that. To your point, be careful with targeting specific classes. You may be actually looking at programming, what programs you're offering. Again, the FTEs are allocated based upon enrollment. So if you have a certain program, you got to have a path. And
Yeah.
sometimes you may have those dips as far as class sizes. So you can't suddenly take out a puzzle piece. So you would
No,
be
good
looking
point.
at your program path.
I think something I would love to see next, from what we used to see with budgeting too, is not just this next coming fiscal year, but looking at a trend that would show the next year and the year after, because I think that was where we would see a history of where our fund balance dipped.
It always did.
Yeah.
And it always will.
It always will, of course.
Yeah, so just because part of it is you're using assumptions based upon the staff that you currently have, the enrollment that you currently have, no new funding that may be coming in. And things start compounding to where your expenditures far exceed anything else that you can bring in. So we are introducing new software in which we're using. It's out of Frontline. Tyler and his team have been working on that. Part of that was the delay for our revised budget as they were moving all of the budget information over to that, which should help us with our assumptions going forward. It's far more dynamic. We do want to bring that to you at some point, whether in a workshop format or whatever, to be able to demonstrate the different dashboards that you will be able to see under this new software. Some of it will have those projections. Some of the reports that you will start seeing going forward will look a little bit different just because of the new programming with that, and we'd love to introduce you to that in time.
So Director Alt asked us to connect the dots, so connecting two things. One, the demographic study, but also remember the enrollment goal we set to maintain the cohorts. So that will help with your projections fiscal year 26. So connecting all of those to bring the best assumptions about that enrollment for years out. That's why it's really important for us to have that
Yeah.
demographic.
I mean, and I understand budgeting is your best guess in the moment, and then, of course, you have a revised budget and you analyze throughout the year and make shifts. But I also, like, since we're trying to build up our general fund, it'd be nice to kind of see just a little down the road how it may be impacted or how quickly it could be impacted.
Sure. And this new software, I think, does have the capabilities to be far more dynamic in that. So like those assumptions, I said you would have the same staff, you have the same expenses. It does offer some more flexibility, so you're looking at more precise numbers probably going forward versus just the big cliff that always seems to be 2 years out.
Yeah.
And it brings in, as you've seen, your cities, how they've changed. There's that apartment building right behind here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you need anything more from us? Do you have what you need to
We're
keep moving
just
forward?
keeping an eye on the legislature and the governor because things are moving fast.
That's good. That's what they're saying they want, is for it to move
yes.
fast and not go into special
Pass our-
session
just
this year.
let,
Pass our exemption too.
newer board members to remember, once it's done, MDE runs all the numbers based on your projected enrollment. And for all those different funding sources, including the local revenue, you get a whole spreadsheet of what you're going to get based on what they pass. So that's really when we churn it up, get you that proposed budget, and then get some input from you, public. Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything's better
Stacy.
than.